What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. I'm so excited to finally being able to give you regular Overwatch 2 news again. We've got the patch notes for the Season 1 launch of Overwatch 2. Does it feel weird to you to be saying Season 1? It does to me. Remember, they're resetting all the competitive seasons, and now the term season will apply to that 9-week span with the Battle Pass and the new stream of content, as well as whenever the actual competitive season starts, hopefully close to launch, and then ending in 9 weeks. And as they've said, they want to come through with big balance changes each season to at least make everything always feel fresh, along with the new content, and adjust it for that. First, though, there was an interesting article confirming that Geoff Goodman, the lead hero designer from Overwatch all this time, left Blizzard. A comment from Blizzard says, "We thank Geoff for his many years of service at Blizzard and wish him all the best. His ability to bring life to Overwatch's diverse hero roster through gameplay has been incredible, and the mark he's left on the Warcraft and Overwatch teams will be felt for years to come." This was rumored to be the case when some community members noticed that there was a job entry for lead hero designer on the Overwatch team. And while this could signal a change based on balance philosophy and how the decisions are made for heroes and all that, somewhat, I think a lot of those decisions to change from Overwatch 1 to 2 were already made while Geoff was there. But they did also say he decided to do it at the beginning of this year, which maybe was sort of like he would have liked to leave with Jeff Kaplan, but then wanted to see the transition of the game under the new paradigm through. Not entirely sure. I really liked Geoff Goodman. I had the opportunity to speak to him off the record, and he was always very knowledgeable and interested, just like any of you would be, talking about the balance, the ramifications, and, well, behind the scenes, he was always really honest. In those eras, Blizzard wasn't always so forthcoming with the truth of the impossible task they had to try to balance the game for everyone all at once. An impossible problem given the format of Overwatch 1 for sure. So I'm unsure if it was the gameplay changes causing this change. And while on one hand, Geoff Goodman and Jeff Kaplan did bring us Brigitte, they also brought us every other hero you love from Overwatch 1. You gotta take the good with the bad. You just can't put every mistake in balancing or tuning at their feet, because, well, that's just what's going to happen when new things are brought. Either way, though, knowing what I know, the direction of hero designs in Overwatch 2 seems to be in a good place when it comes to fun, interactive heroes down the line. And that's to credit to the new overall philosophy of Overwatch 2, not necessarily one person doing their job or not. Next up, let's take a look at the blog post for Overwatch 2 Season 1 changes. This is the patch that you'll get October 4th, which is just under 2 weeks away. Could you believe it? And also, they say this patch will go into the upcoming Overwatch League tournament cycle, the Countdown Cup. So you can use that to preview what the changes might be like. The biggest one, of course, coming to Junkerqueen, whose commanding shout allied health bonus has been reduced from 100 to just 50, and the allied duration reduced from 5 to 3 seconds. However, the temporary health no longer decays over that duration, but the cooldown has been increased from 11 to 15 seconds. The devs say, based on data and feedback received from beta testing and more recently from observing professional play, we believe the temporary health granted by Junkerqueen's shout ability has proven too strong overall and enabled a dominating team composition at the very upper ranks of play. Reducing the health gained and duration while increasing the ability's cooldown are intended to reduce the overall power of this ability and make it more deliberate and less forgiving. We'll continue to monitor Junkerqueen's performance and win rate, as well as broader player sentiment in the weeks following launch. A big elephant in the room for me is that no one has publicly played against the Junkerqueen with Kiriko in the game. What happens when you can cleanse the Junkerqueen ultimate? Is that going to drop her win rate significantly? The overall health bonus that Commanding Shout gives is significantly reduced. Like, if you just do the math, 4 of your teammates used to get 400 health for your whole team. Now it's 200 health if you hit all of them. And then, of course, for breakpoints and whatnot, a total of 50 Overshield health doesn't affect some breakpoints. And against a lot of characters, it might be the difference between an extra body shot or 2. So the health overall won't be as oppressive. But I think the truth is Junkerqueen having a smaller hitbox herself, as well as the speed increase, which remains unchanged, other than the fact that it will only apply for 3 seconds, which does matter a lot. Like your ability to close the distance, 2 seconds less. Okay, now you're not going to be able to run down everything. In hindsight, 5 seconds sounds like an eternity. Keeping in mind, they didn't change any of the interactions with combining it with Lucio. And now we're also going to have Kiriko, though Josh No did say on Reddit at some point, speed boost stacking at the moment caps out at 75%, which you will be able to reach and max with all three of those together. Actually, when I think about it, I think Kitsune Rush plus speed boost does it enough. Now, there's a general patch note where temporary health now grants 50% reduced ultimate charge instead of 0. The devs explain temporary health not giving ultimate charge added a lot of hidden strength to its effect, reducing consequences for riskier decisions and playstyles. This is particularly effective in instances where you can grant temporary health to other players. For the players doling out the damage, doing significant damage but gaining no ult charge can be particularly frustrating and unrewarding. Yeah, like literally, why shoot a temporary shield if it's going to decay? You gain nothing out of it, so you should just run away. They go on to say, with this change, our goal is to preserve some of the advantages granted by temporary health while adding a reward for players who contribute to their teams through damage dealt. This is important because I think a lot of characters are playmakers once they reach their ultimate a little bit faster. So particularly up against Junkerqueen comps, where the whole team's gaining temporary shields all the time with every shoutcast. I would say characters like Winston that want to try to stay in and can stay in longer if they get up to Primal Rage, or Reinhardt, who makes his big punish play by getting ult, or even a character like Ashe poking the comp from afar, punishing its lack of defenses with TNT, reaching Bob, which is just devastating against a defenseless comp. A lot of these interactions are going to be important. There's already the reduced ultimate gain from tanks. Junkerqueen's actually hard to hit because she moves fast and is smaller for a tank. So all these sound like positive changes to me. Keep in mind, it will also affect things like Brigitte Rally, Sound Barrier. So when you're in brawling against these types of abilities, it won't be meaningless to shoot these shields like it kind of felt in the Jotes era. If you watched any of that Overwatch League gameplay, oftentimes it looked so goatsy because both Brig and Lucio's Overshield health took forever to chew through, and you wouldn't even get your own ult off of it. So the targeting of it was just kind of silly. Like you had to figure out who you could isolate and burst, and there's a lot of like Genji pool noodles kind of just brawling with the team. Not a great meta to watch. So gaining ult from temporary shield's a good thing. 2 major gameplay changes to the passives. They tested out a bit of that ultimate refund on DPS swaps in the beta. Now it applies to all heroes, and because of that, damage will get a new role passive. So now all heroes can refund up to 30% ultimate on a hero swap. This is a rather complicated change to explain a bit. The way to guarantee that you understand how this works is that you maintain 100% of your ult, whatever internal points the character has, when you swap heroes, up to 30% of that new hero's ult. That's the logic of the math. So if, say, in some cases, ults are really close in cost, if you have 30% and you swap, you keep all of it if it is a one-to-one exchange. Now, often it isn't, so maybe you need a little more to get 30% on your new hero swap, but that's quite significant, I feel, because oftentimes you get in situations where maybe you're half or 60% to an ult, but not on the hero you want to be on. It really reduces the risk and the setback of swapping heroes. And as we've already talked about, swapping heroes isn't a massive advantage often anyway. It's usually just like removing a clear disadvantage of a matchup, if you have one. And maybe even more so in Overwatch 2, you swap because you feel like you can't contribute properly. And considering tank and support ultimates are more impactful, there probably is ways to game this a bit, since we might feel like 50% of Primal is worth trading into Zarya to go for Graviton. Like there's a lot of crafty swaps that might throw the enemy off guard that I think we'll have to play around with. But I think it sounds fun. It's hard to see it breaking the game, honestly, other than just incentivizing a mechanic that's in the game that doesn't have a huge incentive most of the time anyway. So that's good. Next, the damage roll will get a new passive where eliminations grant 25% increased reload and movement speed for 2.5 seconds. That does not stack with itself, but will refresh the duration. So a character like Genji, for example, might be able to string together this for quite a while, since he's also getting dash resets on limbs too. I think this is a little OP, to be honest. I'm gonna be real. But let's see what the devs say first. We believe that this change is the right balance of rewarding players who perform well in the damage role without being overpowered. However, in future seasons, we may continue to experiment with what these passives do as we look to to shake up the meta regularly. Now, this will be a disproportionate buff to flanker heroes because those are characters that need to close the distance, and like, let's say Tracer or Genji, reloading when you need ammo quickly is a big deal, as opposed to a character like Widowmaker, who doesn't get a huge buff from running in and only needs one shot, one kill. Anyway, a little bit afraid for what this does to a character like Reaper, for example, because it means once you get that first pick, you will have a movement speed advantage to go finish off the rest of the team. Sounds really fun, but also I think just kind of disproportionately balanced. I sort of liked it in beta 2 where DPS just sort of didn't have a passive. I already felt they were a really strong role, so we'll see what they end up doing with this. Next up, changes to tanks. Orisa's base health has been increased from 250 to 275, and base armor gets the same, 250 to 275. Energy Javelin cooldown has been reduced from 8 to 6 seconds. The devs say for a hero rework that has been lauded as fun to play, hard to kill, and particularly potent for an in-your-face tank playstyle, Orisa continues to be a challenging hero to balance. With one of the lowest win rates in the game, giving a hero more health is a reliable solution, and increasing the frequency of her energy javelin should keep her feeling active and more effective as she charges down the front line. Orisa's funny because I think perceptions of her have been so all over the place and changes pretty significantly when you learn the rules of engagement against her. Her dominating you is a bit of a noob trap playstyle where you kind of just don't have to play her game and stay away from her, and then she's not very useful. So I'm going to anticipate that Orisa might feel really strong for the new crop of players that just start playing the game come October 4th. But veterans that maybe have been watching our videos and watch my how to counter Orisa video, even with them buffing her in this way, not really going to feel like it's a big threat. Keep in mind that they have toyed around with her ability to take critical hit damage or not in the previous betas. Currently, because they haven't changed it back, you can headshot her and fortify, which is a really big deal. Like she has more health, but I think it turned out that every level of play found it not too difficult to headshot a shieldless Orisa. So while a fun hero, maybe a bit gimmicky, but will be fun in quick play, I'm sure. DVa's booster impact damage has been increased from 10 to 25. Micro missiles cooldown reduced from 8 to 7. The Call Mech ultimate, so when she needs to get her suit back, cost has been reduced by 12%. The devs say DVa has been slightly underperforming in comparison to the other tanks in 5v5. Increasing the damage on boosters impact will add more weight to that rush in moment for her, leaning into her strength as a fast moving engager who can push deep into the enemy's backlines. I'll also say, guys, DVa is a pretty matchup and map based hero, and it's just a little bit tough to compete with the other dive tanks on the maps that are dive friendly, because both Winston and Ball have a little bit more solidified of a playstyle, whereas Diva's a bit more defensive and reactive, whereas those two are proactive. And considering they both have better range, they just have a bit more flexibility typically. DVa in Overwatch 1 was an amazing tank, but the team comp battles functioned a lot differently in 6v6. And whereas in Overwatch 1, she could say like mark a Winston to really control what he does, now that he's got more armor health, she finds it a bit more difficult to do that and kind of stabilizes the team more. But if the whole game sort of plays that way, and Winston in his bubble does that with sniper damage as well. So I don't know if they're ever going to get the numbers of this correct, so to speak. If you're up against all flankers, so no ranged hit scan, I think having the defense matrix might be a bit better than the shield to pocket a single dive target when they're coordinating. Next up is Brigitte, whose Inspire duration has been reduced from 6 to 5 seconds. That might look small, but remember, Inspire applies to the whole team, so that's a big chunk of stats that no longer is effective. However, of course, you can just keep channeling it in that 5-second period to go infinite with the ability, potentially. The devs say even with the removal of stun from her shield bash, Brigitte continues to be very strong in 5v5, especially in team compositions that take full advantage of the passive healing provided by Inspire. This change doesn't affect Brigitte's raw healing per second. However, it should make her overall effectiveness less generous in situations where she's unable to reapply Inspire. I love playing Brig in Overwatch 2. She has that real supportive element as opposed to the like haha, I've got a stun combo that can insta-kill you. Now you're not a stun bot. Instead, now you play for positioning and manipulation of the team fight. And as a defensive support herself, I think you'll find that with the amount of healing you can do and how survivable you are, considering you don't have to aim like Kiriko headshots, for example, you learn how to play her right. She goes really far still. Change to Baptiste. Biotic Launcher primary fire damage increased from 24 to 25, and Biotic Launcher's primary fire minimum fall-off range has increased from 20 to 25 meters. No dev comments on this one. In short, I'd say this change means that the supports that have weapons need to be able to defend themselves by shooting back in Overwatch 2. They've given Baptiste a lot of buffs. I already thought he was pretty good, but maybe to try to keep up with Kiriko, who has some overlap in terms of being offensive and having a quick save for the team, maybe that's why they felt this buff was necessary. Next change is to Mercy. Pressing crouch during Guardian Angel now launches you straight up. Angelic Descent can now be activated by holding crouch while airborne. The devs say Mercy's beta change allows her to Guardian Angel cancel and boost where she is looking, added a substantial amount of flexibility to her movement. However, boosting upward was difficult for many players, given that they needed to quickly look up before activating and then look down again to survey the battlefield. To address this, the crouch input will now launch her upwards rather of her facing direction. In addition, crouch will also activate Angelic Descent while in air, similar to jump. This adds a much needed quality of life improvement when performing the vertical boost with crouch. With less defenses in Overwatch 2, Mercy players most definitely need to have the movement skills to properly navigate the battlefield and the cover that exists, to properly dodge the different types of threats coming in. With a lot of supports having incredibly threatening offense, it makes sense that Mercy has the most flexible movement. And while yes, Kiriko can blink across the battlefield, Mercy can freely float from cover to cover and should be pretty hard to track down to keep her competitive with the other options. Next up is damage changes to Bastion. Ironclad passive is enabled again, 20% damage reduction while transformed. The devs say, since introducing the newly upgraded Bastion, we've tracked a general sentiment about his new kit being a bit too potent, particularly when in sentry form. To address this previous concern, we removed the Ironclad passive with a goal of reining in that perceived power. Now that we've had more time and game data to evaluate, we believe that returning the Ironclad passive will not push him over the edge. Bastion suffers from a gameplay problem of being a big target and still a bit of a target priority type pick, where the higher level Overwatch player you are, the more you know if Bastion is transformed shooting at your team, he needs the focus fire above just about everything else. And if you have that and he's easy to hit while peeking out, he's not so threatening. However, my advice for new players or players returning to the game October 4th, Bastion is a pretty nasty pick to counteract some overly aggressive tank play because he's got such a big amount of damage and his sticky nade is easy to hit on a diving Doomfist or Winston. So against the characters that really want to full rush you down, Bastion can force them to think twice. But other than that, not like a serious top tier competitive option, especially when like Soldier 76 is just fine and just more flexible. So a bit tough to justify Bastion a lot of the time. Next change is to Reaper, whose Hellfire shotgun spread has been reduced from 8 to 7. Quite a significant buff considering he's still pretty good in Overwatch 2, especially with that new DPS passive. I'm a little afraid at his potential. Spread changes means both easier kills when you're in range, but also you can think of it as an effective range buff, as more of your pellets will be landing at those medium ranges. They've changed this value so many times. Next change is to Sojourn, whose railgun energy gain from non-player targets, barriers, turrets, etc., reduced by an additional 50%. Now, the way it's worded here seems to imply that it used to have a reduction. I never noticed that. Maybe it's just a accidental language. Like, was there any reduction before? I thought there was 0 reduction, but this feels like it makes sense and will mean that Sojourn can't have such a disproportionate matchup up against shields, for example, where as a tank player, you kind of felt just punished for blocking her damage at any point. Kind of just means you have to hide. You still will have to, but she won't be able to farm you and then one-shot your team as easily. Though I will admit, this continues to complicate the issue of trying to track what railgun energy Sojourn's at any given point. They did add the visuals at some point, I think in beta 2, so she lights up when she can give a one-shot, but the cadence of that is a bit difficult to understand, and now there's an extra layer where it's slower on barriers than it is without them, so knowing when you are or aren't safe feels a little tricky against Sojourn, but she's such a hard hero to play for most players, I don't think it's going to make a big deal. She's more of a high-tier problem, so we'll let them deal with her, okay? Next change and last change is the Sombra, whose hack ability lockout duration has increased from 1 to 1.75 seconds. The devs say the duration of hack's ability lockout often goes unnoticed, as in when it was on 1 second, unless it's being used as an active interrupt. While we're not looking to go back to the previous lockout numbers, we do want Sombra to have slightly more time to feel as though the ability is effective. This change stays in line with our goals for less crowd control abilities in Overwatch 2, and we'll continue to closely monitor performance data and player feedback to ensure that this remains the case. Now, I believe this applies to both hacks because EMP applies the quote hack effect. So that means chain hacking something can give you 3.5 seconds when it used to just be 2, if I'm not mistaken on that. I think this feels pretty fair. 1 second felt very easy to shake off, and a lot of Sombra's power for most players, I think, is just being able to pop out of stealth and mow something down. But at higher tiers, though, it only being a second meant that it was incredibly easy to outplay. Guys, that's everything for today's video. You excited to play Overwatch 2 in a couple weeks? This new patch is looking good, and I can't wait to play the new game with the new hero. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like, and hey, why not click subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notified when our new videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.